All right, hey folks, I'm Garrett Dawn, the head of Command. I gotta look in the camera. Head of Command Z. Help you get out of the hell of the mind, back into the home, or at least temporary home of the body, and become a celebrationist. If you've been around the channel before, you know what I'm talking about. If you don't know what I'm talking about, there's plenty of videos on the live tab, plenty of experiments. If you want to go deeper, there's courses, there's all kinds of stuff, ways that you can get involved. So check out the website, radicalandoing.com. You can find me on Facebook if you want to find some polarizing and divisive content to argue with other people about. And a bunch of free stuff out there so you can experiment before you make a leap into the radical undoing world. So that's me. And I want to introduce everybody to Matt. He's a client and friend of mine. He's in Wisconsin, so that's near and dear to my heart. In not quite as cool as Minnesota, but very, very close. Very, very close. So, so Matt, just please introduce yourself a little bit, whatever you want to share about yourself, and then maybe how we met each other, how and why you got into the radical undoing stuff.
Sure. Yeah, like you said, my name's Matt. I live around Milwaukee, Wisconsin, so Midwest. So I got into radical undoing first. I was reading some books by Robert Anton Wilson, kind of turned me on to this stuff, which introduced me to Christopher Hyatt, who had the radical undoing books. I was also kind of into like Eastern religions like Buddhism and whatnot, and they talk a lot about, overcoming your desires, which I feel like, a lot of that has to do with learning to watch your emotions and being able to, control your emotions more and not let them overtake you, like that. And so I wanted to get more into the radical undoing because I was doing it by myself a little bit, but I found Garrett on an old Reddit thread and contacted him and decided to join his class and have made great progress since then.
Oh, that's awesome to hear, man. Do you want to share any details about some of the progress you've experienced?
Yeah, sure. The biggest thing for me is like I'd always let little things bother me. Just kind of overtake me a little bit. And I would say that was like my biggest flaw, but I'd always make excuses like it's that person's fault. But realistically, it's always I'm the one who can control that. If I'm allowing somebody else to control my emotions, that means I'm giving them control of kind of like my life. Since then, like I've noticed, like I've become much more calm in all situations. And there's occasions where little things do bother me, but I notice it much faster. I'm like, well, why do I let it bother me like this? So it's just been a process like that. And that's the biggest thing for me, is just being able to control my emotions. And then also, I feel like I have a much better understanding of like my body. Like I'm much more in tune with it. Like I can feel things that I wouldn't be able to feel before, and notice things quicker than I could before.
Oh, very cool. And how about interactions with other people, if you talk to anybody?
Yeah, actually,
I don't know.
yeah, for sure. Definitely has helped me in interacting with a lot of other people. And actually, like one of the people that I used to let like just little bursts of anger overcome me would be interactions with my older brother, and it never happens anymore. I never get angry with him ever.
Wow.
So,
Did he notice a difference? Did he make a comment about that, or just kind of went under the radar?
I'm positive he's noticed, but we haven't talked about that. No.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Very interesting. Yeah. It's cool that you notice, because sometimes with this stuff, like in my own life, there were things that happened and things that changed. And I wasn't aware of some of the stuff that was changing over the course of the first year, I would say. And I didn't have I had access to Hyatt, but via email, and I didn't even have the video training that hadn't been released yet, when I first got started. So it was all instructions out of books. And some of the audio CDs where he discussed things, and then emails and phone calls with him, before I ever went to one of his in-person workshops. So I think the progress was probably slow, and I didn't know always if I was doing the exercises correctly. So I'd be writing emails that were just asking little tiny details, Oh, when I'm doing the face, should I be like this? Should I be like that? But over the course of that year, so many things changed, and then it was other people that made me aware of it, because it was hard to discern even from the inside what was actually changing.
Yeah.
Maybe the most distinct thing that happened was over a period of 2 weeks, and I was involved in all kinds of politics way back then. I was an anarchist, so I had enemies.
Yeah.
I don't really think I have enemies anymore, but I mean, at least I'm not aware of them, let's say. But I had enemies in the town I lived in Oregon, and over the course of 2 weeks, this was probably like 7 or 8 people. I would run into them at random places, at the grocery store, and I hadn't seen some of them forever, but all of them came up at various places and times and apologized to me. There was no discussion, no rehashing the past. They were just like, "Hey man, I treated you badly, and I don't feel good about that. I want to apologize." And I didn't really notice anything about it the first 2 people where it happened, and then when it just all came rolling in, it kind of blew my mind. And I attributed that to the undoing work. There was nothing else that I could find that would have led to that happening, especially everyone at once. But the strangeness of some of the results were that wasn't like I sought them out or they sought me out. It was that they arrived randomly, you know what I mean, at different places in town. So there can be some quite uncanny things that happen. And I can't explain exactly the mechanics behind why that would work that way. I just know that it does. It was preceded by a dream where all those enemies followed me into a movie theater. And then there was a giant, like semi-trailer type thing sitting in the theater, not on wheels, but that shape of a container. And I didn't want to sit with the enemies and watch the film, so I went into the back of the container, and there was 2 like Gandalf-looking magician guys.
Yeah.
And I was involved with like OTO and different things at that point. That was kind of towards the end of that involvement, and but it didn't look like those typical, or it didn't look like OTO people. It looked like movie wizards, and I got in, and they were standing there, and it was kind of ominous feeling. And one of them said, one of them turned around, and I was going to leave, and then the other guy put his hand on my shoulder. It's like I can still feel it. And he's like, no, you're going to stay in here with me. And there was like a sink, a metal steel, I think it was metal sink. Maybe it wasn't metal sink, but it was like maybe it was ceramic, and then a bowl. And in the bowl was this shimmering metallic liquid. And he said, okay, or no, he didn't say anything. He just started kneeling me down in front of it. And in my head, in the dream, I was thinking, all I have to do is remember that this is just a vision. This is just a vision. So no matter what happens, if I remember that, everything's fine. And then it was like the liquid absorbed into my consciousness. And then in that same moment, when I opened my eyes, I woke up in my bed. And that spun me out for a while. Because then I was like, oh, okay, so this is just a vision, And, I don't know if I ever got over it, but I got used to it, let's say. And then it was following that dream that then those enemies, each of the enemies in the dream, approached me in the town, and then made their apology or remade some connection.
Wow, that's kind of crazy how that happens that way.
Yeah. It is kind of crazy. If it didn't happen to me, I wouldn't believe. Probably if someone told me that, But all kinds of so-called, I don't like the word anymore, but all kinds of so-called synchronicities were going on.
Yeah, that's like what Robert Anton Wilson talked a lot about, synchronicities, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I had read a ton of his books, and to be fair, I was practicing with a group prior to that or around the same time. I had put together a group to work through his quantum psychology book.
Mm.
Which I thought was excellent. It was really fun and fascinating group activities.
Yeah.
I think one that comes to mind was if there's any couples in the group, to reenact their most recent argument, but take the opposite person's position.
Ooh.
And they were brought to tears during that. And we recorded them doing that. We recorded the audio of them doing that. And then we recorded an audio of them listening to the audio, and they were brought to tears again. And we tried to do this infinite loop thing, you know. Maybe it was brutal for those two. They eventually did break up, but that was one that I remember the most. And then also the Prometheus Rising. I did most of the stuff out of that.
Okay,
It
yeah.
was also kind of a fascinating book. Good primer, let's say prior to the Undoing.
Yes.
And probably some of those had influence on how I've structured like the intensives.
Hmm.
You know,
Well, that makes
incorporating
sense.
the body work with a daily adventure. You know,
Hmm.
hitting the body work, the Undoing stuff heavy in the morning, doing your adventure for the day, and then taking it easy, doing the silent present stuff at night.
Hmm.
Which, yeah, I don't know where I got onto that tangent, but it's fascinating, the results. I've had clients where they worked with me on a specific problem and then later forgot that we ever worked together on that problem because it was like so seamless that they forgot that they ever had the problem, you know.
Nice.
So luckily I had like video and notes of those instances. But yeah, interesting stuff. Yeah, so let's talk about. We mentioned you and I had gotten in a private discussion about cosmology and gravity. I think I had
Hmm.
mentioned
Yep.
something on a weekly group session that I don't believe in gravity. I use the term, and then I feel weird and gross if I use the term
Yeah,
because
yeah.
I think it represents another phrase I don't like to use, but it does work. People will understand it. I think that the science around gravity represents kind of a crack in the matrix. You know what I mean? It's like
Yes.
something you're not. Don't look behind the curtain, kind of thing.
Yes, exactly.
And it's the logical fallacy of begging the question. Most of their answers are just mathematical formulas about the force or about the acceleration of falling objects. You know.
Right. Yeah. The way I see it is they observe something, and then if it doesn't fit the model that they've been pushing for so long, they come up with an ad hoc explanation to make it fit. Is
Yeah.
how I see it. There's not really science behind it.
Yeah, I heard the guy mentioned before we got on the call, Jim Bob, talking about what is the original mass attracts mass experiment? I forget the guy's name. The one that they call
Cavendish?
Cavendish. Yeah.
Yep.
So he was talking with somebody, if I'm remembering the argument correctly, but the idea was like, well, shouldn't two huge buildings like skyscrapers that are near each other start attracting each other? You know,
Yeah.
these solid pieces of mass. And then the answer from the counterpoint science guy was like, well, no, they're so small in comparison to the planet. And he said, well, how big were the Cavendish marbles? You know,
Right. Yeah. They were yeah, some metal balls that he had in a shed, and he had to
yeah,
observe the attraction. He had them on a torsion balance. He had to observe the attraction between them with a telescope from through a window in the shed because otherwise, you know, his mass would affect everything. But there's no way you can control for like like drafts that are coming through the shed, or the biggest one is electrostatics because everything has an electric charge to it and can
hmm
repel and attract depending on the charge of the two objects. So it's just pseudoscience that they try to tell you, oh, we figured it out.
right. And then they'll duplicate the Cavendish in colleges and universities, and then people will claim to have witnessed mass attracting mass. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. If you come across like honest professors about it, they'll say that they get like differing results every time they do it. And they'll even say that sometimes it repels, the two objects repel each other, and sometimes they attract. So, like,
Yeah.
how much science can there be really be behind it if you get such differing results?
That's fascinating. So I want to zoom out a little bit and try and tie in how does this relate to undoing? And I've often said, okay, you need to undo the chronic tensions in the body,
Mhm.
and that at least for discussion purposes, the chronic tensions in the body are correlated with lies or static in the mind. So a simple example would be a person sitting in in a safe country, in a safe neighborhood, in a safe house, in a safe bedroom, terrified of some kind of their own survival. You know what I mean? Terrified of dying of something that's only existing inside their minds.
Yeah.
And so the lie in the mind is only held in place because the evidence all around the person is that there is actually no threat present. But the body's reacting with tension as if there is a threat. So the correlation is there between the lies in the mind versus the tension in the body. And I think when we have on a worldview level, on a perspective level, if a worldview doesn't accurately or let's say coherently account for epistemology, metaphysics, like the existence of the mind and information, this kind of stuff, and then morality, what is good, or how do we say one thing is better than one other thing, or that you ought to do something. And if a worldview doesn't coherently account for those three things, then it causes static, or it causes cognitive dissonance in relation to reality. And so I think people's broken worldviews start to come apart when they start down the radical undoing path.
Yeah.
You want to speak to some of that at all in your own experience, or how I just wanted to lay that foundation for the discussion so people can understand how it relates to this
Yeah.
undoing the body tensions.
Yeah, absolutely. I think a lot of people, when they take on different worldviews that are told to them, they become emotionally attached to them. So if they're presented with evidence that what they think they know or what they've been taught is wrong, they immediately like shut down. They can't argue about things, or even just simply think about things in a rational perspective. They just shut down right away. And radical undoing has definitely helped me be able to logically think about things, even if I don't adopt an idea, just to hear an idea and just simply to contemplate it. I think is a healthy thing. I think it was like Socrates, I believe it was him, that said something along the lines of that the sign of an intelligent man is somebody who can contemplate an idea without adopting it. And I think that is a very accurate perspective. About 3 years ago, like I was heavy into politics, and that's a big one. People become very attached to their position in politics, and I know I would get angry, like talking to somebody that didn't agree with me about something, like look, think they're an idiot, because they didn't think the same way that I did. But you gotta understand that everybody arrives at their position in life based on their own life experience. They got there somewhere. Nobody wants to be wrong. So I think just to be able to talk to people in an open and calm manner is very healthy.
Yeah, I've certainly been guilty over the years of being full of pride and haughtiness, and
Yeah.
probably even recently. I remember the comedian Doug Stanhope said something like, "I'm going to come and call you guys a bunch of idiots for not knowing something I just learned about 5 minutes ago."
Yeah,
I've
I mean,
certainly been guilty of that,
oh yeah, for sure. Me too. Very true.
Yeah, well, that's something I'm really enjoying about orthodoxy. We can get there, but well, just it's created some amount of humility and the ability to stand up and brush myself off when I have fallen into those mistakes, and to actually just immediately apologize to someone, even if I think their position is wrong, but I notice what I've done as some kind of transgression against another human,
Yeah.
regardless of what they did to me, regardless of what how I feel about them, but that I've transgressed a boundary within myself against someone for no, and every single one of those times I was out of control. It was not something where I was thinking, oh, okay, I'm going to say this to this person. Now it was always some flippant, reactive sort of statement.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. And it seems like one of the harder things to do in life is to admit you're wrong or that you've been wrong. That's why people attach themselves to ideas, you know.
Yeah. And then you can dig yourself a deeper hole. The longer you cling to that wrong idea, you know.
Yeah, or you start throwing around like insults at people, you just dig yourself in further. It gets harder and harder to admit that you were wrong.
Yeah. Made me remember a time when I was probably like 16 or 17, and I was super into punk rock in those years. And my friend Blake was over at my house. This was in Princeton, Minnesota. And my parents wouldn't let me take the car out. I don't remember even why, but I was so pissed off. And I just stormed downstairs, and Blake came down there with me. And I was just stomping around and all angry. And I had this drumstick from some band. And I threw the drumstick across the room, and it spun. And I don't know why I had this bookshelf right in the middle of the room, but it went through the back piece of the bookshelf and then like was suspended there in midair. And it was so amazing that I started laughing my head off, you know, but I could feel something inside me. I wanted to be angry. I wanted to be pissed off and throw a tantrum. But when I threw that thing through the bookshelf, then I couldn't, my friend Blake just broke down laughing, and we both, you know, let it go after that and did something else. But yeah, it's funny. The anger thing. And a lot of people have come to the Command Z or the Radical Undoing work to deal with anger.
Yeah.
And I think it is something that's possible to overcome. I've seen evidence of that in some of the lives of the saints and the writings of church fathers, but also in other places too. If you can sit still, and some of it has to do with the frame that psychology and psychiatry put around it, and put around our perception of ourselves. It's always about managing or coping with in that world. But if you have the world of, let's say, Christianity, for example, where there is a belief in demonic influence, I think that sometimes that cosmology fits better than the psychiatric or psychological paradigm, which is essentially just another descriptive but not prescriptive, set of analyses. But that if you're aware that it's something that's not you, but that's operating against you, and in my experiences of anger and outbursts, it does seem that way. It wasn't something, like I said before, that was consciously chosen or that was even in my control to stop. But the ability to sit still for somewhat long periods, at least 10, 15, 20 minutes in the morning and at night, and just watch myself has created a distance between me and the feelings and emotions in the body, and the distance between my identity as an observer and then the thoughts.
Yeah.
And that's huge. That's a huge thing. And I don't know that I could have sat down and had those same results before the bodywork stuff. I did sit and do all kinds of meditations and stuff like this in the past, but I think I had a wrong frame around that too. I was looking for a mystical experience, you know?
Okay. Yeah.
So then my mind was constantly focused on analyzing if I was getting there or not. So I wasn't really sitting in silence and observing. I was actually looking for a mystical experience to happen. You know what I mean?
Yes. Yeah.
And that's a pretty serious blockade as well. Sorry.
Yeah. I mean, I did meditation for a number of years, you know, and it helped in certain things, but really didn't help with like emotional issues or anything like that. And I had same experience as you, kind of. I don't know that I was looking for a mystical experience, but I certainly wasn't doing meditation the way that it's intended to be done.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty fascinating. I've recently got into more traditional style prayer, which I found fascinating.
Okay.
What led me to, and I'm curious about your experience of this as well. What led me to it, I was aware of prayer for a long time, since I was an atheist, you know. And the other kids at high school, the probably Protestant Christians were like, "Oh, we're going to pray for you, Garrett." And I was like, "Don't do that," you know, this whole dynamic. Now I look back and think, wow, I'm kind of glad they did. That was sweet of them, you know.
Yeah, for sure.
It was such a sweet thing, but I had no grasp of it at the time, and I was so full of myself and full of anger and full of this punk rock thing that I couldn't really comprehend even what they were talking about. What's funny is I was listening to like Johnny Cash, and I had all these bands and songs I was listening to that were all about Jesus, and I loved the songs. I just didn't make the connection.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
but recently got turned on by this guy. He's a priest monk, Cosmas, in Australia, and he has a series of talks called Orthodox Talks on YouTube and things. And they were hard for me to listen to at first because he's really traditional and hardcore the way he presents information. So it took me time to kind of ease into what he has to say. But he has one about prayer that I was fascinated by. And what it gave me an awareness of was first that the struggles in life are not to be run away from or avoided or even overcome, but that the struggles in life are essentially part of the purpose of being alive. The purpose
Yeah.
of our existence is to engage in that struggle, and that there's no neutral ground. That there's not like that it's either good or evil that's influencing us, and then that there's help available, and that when you do enter into struggle, and that it's alternated with grace. So there's grace, which some people have called the flow, and they try to reverse engineer the flow state and all this from a scientific materialist perspective.
Yeah.
I like the word grace, but I think it has some relation to this idea of flow, meaning everything's going smoothly, everything's going okay. Some of the monks I've read say that when you're experiencing grace, that you should know that temptation and struggle is around the corner, and when you're in the midst of struggle, you can rest easy knowing that an experience of grace will eventually arrive as well. And that conception, that frame around the struggle, has completely transformed my view of what's going on for myself and other people.
Yeah.
I don't so much have a drive to alleviate the struggle. I might try to help someone alleviate suffering, especially what I call fake suffering, this meaningless, endless loops of the mind. That can certainly be overcome. You can step right outside of that. But the actual struggles in life, I see they're not to be avoided, and that they're not such a bad thing. And in that awareness, I've been able to zoom out and to recognize when I am in some kind of state of struggle, internal or external. And then there's this wealth of prayers that you can turn to, whether they're just spontaneous from oneself, asking for help or asking for guidance, and then also prayers for other people, rather than trying to intervene in someone's life with my great wisdom, or what ways that I think I can help. Of course, someone's hungry and I have food. Okay, there's an obvious thing, right? That's not the situations I'm talking about. But someone's struggling existentially, I don't really try to talk them out of it anymore. But there is this, but there's a possibility of praying for them to be illuminated, or for them to be enlightened as to what's going on, and to be able to embrace that struggle and persist through their life, and get whatever it is they need.
Yeah.
So I find that framework to be quite fascinating. But as I'm saying it, I'm wondering how it would be received, for example, by a scientific materialist, or by someone who got super into Hyatt via the occult stuff. And I've had
Right.
some people come at me and like, oh, you're a Christian now, and that's counter to what Hyatt was teaching. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. I don't think he was teaching the same stuff at the end of his life that he was writing about in 20, 30 years earlier in the occult books, for one.
Yeah.
And then, and then he became a somewhat more religious Jew toward the end of his life, as far as I know. I didn't have the occasion to talk to him about that. But there was footage of him building a school in Israel and traveling over there and doing like really traditional prayer and this kind of stuff. So sadly, I don't have any anecdotes or stories directly from him about that. But that's neither here nor there, because I'm not trying to live up to whatever he was prescribing in one of his occult books. But I have, let's say, faithfully carried forward what he taught me about the body work itself, which I think
Yes.
is ultimately of most importance. And what I understood from him, that was the thing he wanted to pass on anyway, for it to be kept alive. But yeah, so I'm blabbing away. I want to hear from you. So what about just share some stories? How did you find your way? So I don't know if you are in Orthodoxy or not, but you mentioned that you've kind of let go of scientific materialism on some level. And I'd be curious about anything you want to share about that.
Absolutely. Yeah, I completely let go of scientific materialism. Um, I would call myself like a Christian, but I'm very open to religions throughout the world. It's one of my big interests is to read like what other places say, like the old Vedic texts, or is a big one of mine. Buddhism is another one. But I'm open to all that kind of stuff. Um, I think like in terms of like prayer is very powerful. But I think like any of the thoughts that are running through your head, like have the power to create the reality around you. Um, so, I mean, what I like to do right now is actually like in the morning for 10 minutes, I write just who I want to be, but basically saying I am that, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So it's not, I don't say I want to be this, I want to be that. I say I am this, I am that. And I can tell you, like, it has had a very positive influence on me. Um, and then I usually do prayer at least once a day as
What is that
well.
one?
What's that?
What is the prayer you called it?
Oh, it's non-specific prayer, just prayer.
Ah, okay. Okay. Okay.
Yeah. So, yeah, I'm not like tied to any specific religion, but I believe, absolutely believe in a creator. And definitely believe that I was given free will, and that I can do like make of my life like what I want to. Like it's on me to make it what I want it to be, instead of like blaming others for for my misgivings or
Yeah.
whatnot.
Yeah. The blame of others is a huge one, right? The victim mindset. I used to always refer to the undoing journey as a victim to adventure, you know?
That's yeah.
Uh,
We see that a
though I don't
lot.
know that that's. What's that?
You see
Please.
the victim mindset a lot these days.
Yeah.
I think
It
it's
got
kind of like
huge now, right?
it's huge. It's I think it's an obvious like campaign to push it onto people. Like life's not fair. Like I get it in some circumstances. Like yeah, you were a victim of something. However, like having the mindset is not going to do you any good.
Yeah. Yeah. It's terrible. And especially when the identity gets locked onto the idea of being a victim, then it's like a hell. It's very hard to escape that
Hmm.
because there's always someone else to blame. So there's never what is the way out? How can you get a crack in that kind of armor? You know?
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's a hard thing to overcome. I mean, it's part of like how people are programmed these days, and I would say that like I kind of had a little bit of that mindset a few years back, and it's definitely one of the things that I pushed to overcome, because it just you'll rot away if you just blame others for all your problems.
Definitely. Yeah, it's crazy. And the way I used to formulate the transition was that you had to activate your inner spy.
Mhm.
So you're currently in some victim state, probably don't even realize it, and then the inner spy has to become active by like just starting to watch what's going on,
Mhm.
and even try to celebrate everything that's going on the, let's say on the texture level. I used to call it a texture, meaning if you could back out and see your life as like a tapestry or like a melody or something, or an orchestra, or I mean a symphony. One funny meme I made was Command Z putting the fun back in funerals, but wasn't meant exactly like that. But it was meant that even in the most difficult challenges, that you could, within the space of the mind or awareness, enjoy the texture of it, enjoy the depth of your own sadness and the quality, the aesthetic of the whole situation, and that there's nothing wrong with actually appreciating that aspect of life
Yeah,
and
that's
not bypassing, not dismissing what's going on, but actually indulging in it completely. At the same, not indulging either, but allowing it completely. and be
Hmm.
whatever it is, but keeping this little corner of the mind free of affliction, even in the midst of severe intensity and emotions and loss and suffering.
Yeah. Yeah. That's interesting.
And I
I
could see the when I heard from or mountain climbers, who climbed Denali or something, and it takes 30 or 40 days, and they're buried under an avalanche in a snow cave, and they dig out and just keep going up. You
wow.
know, so with the adventure mindset, it doesn't matter really what happens. You just aim your compass again and keep marching forward. Sorry to
Right.
cut you off there. What were you going to add?
Yeah. I don't know that that'd be tough to do it during a time of sorrow, but like being the inner spy, like there's certain times where in past years, like I'd be sitting there bored or something, but I really don't get bored anymore. Like just being aware of what's going on around me is just pretty fun to just look out and watch what's going on around you.
Yeah, yeah. And there's always something going on. I mean, this creation is so amazing. All the
It is.
details, that you can zoom in and out on. It's mind blowing. Some of the exercises I used to have people do was to clean your house, but like pay yourself some money, like leave out
Oh,
$50 or whatever, and then clean your house as if you're the maid
oh,
or the housekeeper, and then really, really try to tweak your mind so that you forget that you're the one who lives at the house, and then try to observe or try to notice what you can and make observations about who lives in this place. Like try to figure out what characteristics or traits that person who lives there must have.
that sounds interesting, actually.
Yeah, it's fun stuff, man. Um, what was another one like that? Or yeah, to just look around your room and as if you're a stranger and just go through all the items like as if somebody died there and you're trying to piece together who was this.
Yeah,
Can be some shocks, in that.
yeah, for sure. Yeah, I imagine you don't go through the day thinking about that because you already know who you are, but what would
Yeah,
somebody else think? It's
yeah.
interesting.
And we don't always know what impression we're giving off to other people.
Yep.
I think in some of the samurai literature, the leaders would say that they would have like four other generals because they wanted that would constantly observe them and tell them what's going on and how they saw them and how they saw what the orders were going to be and how they saw the plans, so that they could because they knew they had blind spots.
Mm,
So they would
yeah.
hire trusted people to constantly tell them what the things that they weren't able to see.
Nice.
Yeah, it's interesting. So I wanted to ask you, and I will have to go like at let's say in 15 minutes, I think.
Sure.
But I might have more time. I'll check on the phone, but I have a guest coming at some point. But
Okay.
we'll definitely do this again. We can continue. I think we're just scratching the surface. But what I wanted to ask you was just to describe what was this transition like from the scientific materialist kind of the stuff we're force fed as a kid. I guess the big ones are evolution, gravity, this kind of stuff, without trying to push too many buttons, but you can speak freely. Um, what was your transition like? Like what, if you remember, like take us on a little journey.
Yeah, yeah. So I guess it all started at the beginning of COVID. I won't talk too much about it, but
Sure, sure.
I just started reading. Well, I started working at home for my job, and so it gave me extra time. And I decided with that extra time that I wanted to read more books. And I just started reading books about American Empire at first, but then it branched off into other like conspiracy related things, um, big ones from the past. And then eventually it led to questioning some medical things regarding what was going on.
Yeah.
And looking into that, I learned that science, like when they kept telling me to not question the science, things like that, that the science that they were feeding me wasn't science at all. Um, and it's pretty easy to look into if you're open-minded. But from that, from that point, eventually branched off into cosmology, which was something like I would have never thought of questioning at all. After all, I've been shown like what the world and the universe is since I was a very young age. But repetition is a very good like brainwashing technique. I think there's some good quotes about that. I think Joseph Goebbels said something along the lines of, if you repeat the lie often enough, like people will just repeat it and they'll believe it too. So, it definitely all started with the conspiracy stuff. So just being able to question things that I wasn't able to question before, and then like going through it, it's kind of a very humbling experience because they had all these like attachments to like what I thought the world was, and I would have never been open to questioning it before. So yeah, launched me down like the cosmology rabbit hole, like gravity, but all the theories that branched off from there too. Like I have looked into those, like the theory of relativity or expanding universe, dark matter.
Yeah, share a bit about some of those. I think maybe this will be the first time for some people to hear about these things.
Sure. So I'll just start with the theory of relativity, but it starts with this experiment that took place in 1881 and 1887 called the Michelson-Morley experiment. And what they did was they had this device called an interferometer. They shot beams of light in opposing directions. And what it was supposed to do was measure the speed of the Earth through the ether. And for those that don't know, like the speed of the Earth around the sun, according to NASA, would be 66,600 miles per hour. So they're supposed to get a drip between the light, because they shot them in perpendicular directions, one going with the Earth, one going perpendicular to it. And they found no difference, which would mean either the Earth was stationary or something else was going on. So Einstein came along probably like 15, 20 years later and came up with the theory of relativity. And in order to nullify the results of Michelson-Morley, he came up with equations to nullify the results. So basically what he says happened was that the arm of the device that was going in the direction of the Earth's movement actually contracted in length. So motion causes objects to contract. Also, time has to dilate, and also the mass of the object has to increase, all in order to nullify the results of Michelson-Morley. So, that's ad hoc science right there. There's no proof that any of this happened, and they say that as long as you're in the same reference frame as the experiment, that you wouldn't be able to tell the difference. Like even if you put a ruler up to it, well, the ruler contracted too. So you can't tell the difference no matter what.
But you can't conduct any test either along those lines, right?
No way. There's a lot of, not a lot, but there's some mainstream scientists who do speak out about it, but that they say that the theory of relativity has been falsified many times before, and there's many reasons for it. But yeah. Another one is 1925, Edwin Hubble. He's observing the universe or galaxy clusters, and he's observes what's called redshift, which is his wavelength that's on the longer side of the spectrum. And so he postulates that, he sees redshift everywhere, basically. What he postulates is that means that everything is moving away from us because of the longer wavelengths. But the problem with that is, according to the Copernican principle, everything in the universe has to be homogeneous. So like you have to observe the same thing from everywhere. So if everything is moving away from the Earth, that means it looks like we are in the center of the universe. So that's where they come up with this idea of the expanding universe. Meaning that no matter where you are in the universe, it looks as if everything is expanding away from you. So it looks homogeneous. And there were other observations he made that went against it too, and he had to make some sort of, I can't remember exactly what it's called, but observations that showed the universe not to be homogeneous, which would destroy the Copernican principle. And in his books, he calls the idea of a favored position, like the Earth being the center of the universe, as intolerable, like just dead set against it. There's better words for it, but I can't remember them off the top of my head. But he definitely did say intolerable, this idea that we're in a favored
Intolerable.
position. Yeah,
Yeah.
so it just kind of exposes the philosophical bias that these guys have. I mean, because it's not like prior to him having these observations, nobody thought the universe was expanding. They thought it was static. And even Einstein actually thought it was contracting. So at one point, I don't know, I think he changed his position on that at some point. But so it didn't, his observation didn't agree with what they thought it would be. And so they just create this new idea of what it is, ad hoc explanations, in order to keep the Copernican theory alive, really. And,
And do you know the history around the Copernican theory? Was there pressure from anywhere to promote that specific idea? Was there an agenda behind it, or is that speculative?
I mean, like it's speculative for me because I don't know enough about it, but I've seen like certain groups blamed for like pushing an agenda. A big one, a lot of people, well, some of the things I've seen think it was like the Jesuit order pushing the Copernican principle. But I mean, you're getting into like secret societies and stuff like that, and it's
Sure.
hard to know exactly why they push this the way that they do, other than to just brainwash you, give
Sure.
you get
What
you.
I've understood, what I've kind of understood, or where I've arrived at, is that the generalized like education agenda or brainwashing agenda to push these specific ideas, particularly Big Bang, expanding universe, evolution,
Hmm.
and some of these other ones, is that it smuggles in or helps create a worldview that extrapolates to nihilism, but that most people don't ever extrapolate it, but they're living basically on nihilist principles without realizing it. And then they're
Absolutely,
easily controlled. Yeah.
absolutely, and I was there, so
Yeah.
I know that that's what the view I had of the world. It's like, what's this for? But you kind of discover along this path, like I discovered that I'm being lied to about these certain things. And I mean, the obvious point to me is that they were hiding like God or a creator from me
Mm-hmm.
because I was an atheist like 3 years
Mm-hmm.
ago, um,
Wow.
based on this idea that if there's the Big Bang theory is true, if evolution is true, how can there be a God? That didn't
Yeah.
make sense to me, you know.
There
But
also can't even be free will in evolution.
mhm,
There's no mind. There's no mind. There's no information. Shared language would be impossible.
mhm,
You know.
yep,
But I don't know that anyone thinks that through that far. I don't think that I did either till I heard someone else kind of presenting it. For me, it was that the anarchist position became untenable. I was like, I'm missing something about reality. All there is this fight I have. And for me, it was like against civilization. It wasn't just about, I wasn't into like Marxism, and I never bought that at all. Marxism or communism, or that type of anarcho syndicalism, like seize control. I was like, I don't want to work in the factory, even if I do own it. Like,
yeah,
no,
yeah,
that's not what I'm interested in. But I was more into the nature and primitivism, which I don't think is a coherent worldview either anymore. But at some point, I felt like this is absurd, this battle, this fight. And then also when I met Dr. Hyde, he said something like, I had this anti-fascist tattoo, and he said something like, which of your parents was the fascist? And somehow it hit at the right moment, and I was like, whoa, okay. He was pointing out like this struggle you're having has nothing to do with what's outside of you.
mhm,
And it was, I think it took quite a while after that to kind of come to terms with the realization. He was good with pointing out things like that in a brutal way that would have effects over time, kind of unravel undo, your worldview or your mindset over time.
Yeah.
But it was a long, winding path from there, and a fun one, a fun adventure to actually let those worldviews collapse. Sometimes sad, sometimes difficult, sometimes painful, but ultimately like a nice adventure, I'd say. But so how did that go from how did that transition go? So from atheist to then faith in God.
Yeah. I mean, for me, it was actually kind of definitely a blessing because, um, you know, and like I was slowly getting there, but when I started looking into the cosmology stuff, it just hit me like a ton of bricks. Um, and going through a lot of that prior conspiracy stuff is can get very depressing.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
so along the way, I was like had like bouts where I was like just depressed. Like, what is this for? Like, does anything even matter? And so um, as soon as I hit the cosmology stuff, I mean, I was just like overjoyed because to me it proved that there's got to be a creator, has to
yeah.
be, yeah.
Do you
Um,
want to explain just a little bit about the logic behind that?
the logic behind it,
Yeah,
well, I mean, it all has to do with the science um, that we're being fed. Like if it's false and that we're in the center of the universe, and like I'm not gonna get into like everything they say about the universe is kind of just crazy. They tell you all these vast distances. They tell you what things are light years away, which is
hmm,
trillions and trillions of miles. I don't think they know any of that. So
yeah,
it's just to me, if what they're telling us about what's out there is incorrect, and you can see that all the experiments that have ever been done in human history has shown that number one, we are not moving, and number two, we are at the center.
yeah.
And if that's true, something had to create this. And I think this is all that there is. Like all this idea that they're going out there in space, they're gonna find all kinds of civilizations is just I don't know quackery to me. It's crazy.
Yeah, man. I was reading some books by Jay Dyer, Esoteric Hollywood. And it's
I know
funny
they
because the name of the book doesn't quite do it justice. It is fascinating just on that level. But what hit me after reading about and he kind of breaks down movie after movie after movie. But what was amazing, and it's super well documented and footnoted. So you can actually trace your way back to official articles and official statements and things from various agencies. And it was like this pattern of all these movies about space and referring to space travel and things like this and
yeah
aliens, and that they're just like they're just like tilling the field in young people's minds to plant specific seeds that will grow into beliefs about aliens and outer space that you would never be able to question, or that
hmm
would be very difficult to question because it was installed in such a way that it has emotional attachment and
yeah
that is like it's like almost like trying to tell you your favorite dog as a kid didn't exist. It's that close to people's hearts.
yeah
And then all the movies, Whitley Strieber, what was that one called? I forget the name of the movie, but anyway, all these alien movies, Close Encounters of the Third Kind,
hmm
2001: Space Odyssey. Then
that
even
was
like
a good one.
less evil seeming ones like Star Wars and Star Trek. It just smuggles in the presupposition that obviously there's outer space and we're going to be exploring it someday, in this manner.
Yes,
And no one ever questions like, oh, how are you getting propulsion?
in a
How are you
vacuum.
getting
Yes,
yeah.
it's crazy.
Yeah, and ignition. Um, so I want to ask. So we're toward the end of the time, but are you free this time next week?
I should be. Yeah,
Okay, if you want, why don't we just do this again? We can continue and kind of go deep with some of this stuff. I think it's pretty
yeah,
fun.
yeah. That'd be
Yeah.
fun for
Okay.
sure.
Awesome. So for folks that are listening, yeah, what would you say is a good way to begin to like gently look at this stuff, but without, completely destroying their family life and friendships with other people, this kind of thing?
Yeah, yeah. In terms of the cosmology stuff, I would recommend it's a documentary called The Principle. It's by Robert Sungenis. Um,
Never heard of this one.
it's excellent. It's a good starting place. He has also a couple of books that, if you finish that documentary, they're good. Like he goes deep into these different things, and you'd probably be the number one place that I got these ideas. But I double checked everything. I looked
Yeah.
at it to make, because I don't want to sound like a crazy person, even
Yeah.
though he does, but it's all right.
Well, and I guess the interesting thing is that you don't have to like ruin the family barbecue just because, you know what I mean? Like
Hmm.
there's some things that are more important, let's say, than these particular ideas. Now, if a person's on the edge or they're asking questions, okay, that's one thing.
Yeah,
But we can still be kind to each other, be kind to our neighbors, be kind to our families, and
for sure.
um, if they're not suffering as a result of these lies they've been told, then it's not like you have to run around and tear everyone's walls down for them.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I don't generally try to tear people's walls down. I plant seeds, like
Yeah.
just throw out this one fact about something they may not know and let it like fester in their mind for a while. And maybe that helps them become open-minded about these ideas.
And what do you think is the goal of this? Tell me the guy's name again, because I want to write this down. The documentary.
Robert Sungenis.
Robert Sungenis.
Yeah, I think it's Sungenis, if I remember
Okay,
right.
so cool. That should be easy enough to find. And if anybody watching finds a link, you can drop it in the comments. But
Yeah, it's on YouTube for free. So
okay. Well, thanks a lot for coming on, man. It's interesting, and there is some interwoven stuff. Like when you start undoing the tensions in the body, then it does undo some of the lies of the mind, and I think it leaves an open hole to start investigating. The way I've said it is, I'm not trying to promote the truth, at least in this capacity with radical undoing. And that's why I use the languaging around it that I do. Not trying to add something to a person, but just trying to destroy what's obviously false. And I
correct. Yeah.
think that the chronic tension in the body does not need to be there. And when you
Hmm.
start to undo that, then it starts to unlock these doors in the mind. And I think looking down these paths can start to bring at least the individual some sense of peace and some sense of coherency to what's going on and why we are here, and it at least allows them to start to question it on a meaningful level.
Yep. Yeah, it's definitely brought me a level of peace.
Very cool. Yeah, I mean, you seem really grounded and stuff. So I think it's cool that we have this discussion without somebody, getting into the gematria or going, oh, well, you got to, and the two towers, and this, and this, and this. And you're like, dude, no. Like, you know what I mean? If you,
Oh, I've
I've been
watched.
guilty of, I've been guilty of being that character probably at certain times, but I'm not sure like how much it helped anybody or myself.
Oh yeah, I know. Sometimes it's really interesting though, so you just find
Yeah.
yourself going down that rabbit hole.
Yeah,
So
yeah, it can be fun to look into. Well, I'm gonna check out. Hopefully, I'll try to watch that documentary before next Thursday, and then maybe we can go deeper with some of this stuff. It'd be fun to talk about. Yeah,
yeah, it sounds good.
right on. Well, thanks for coming on, Matt. I really appreciate it. And this has been nice to have this time to just talk with you and share about these things. So
Yeah, yeah. Thanks for having me.
appreciate. Yeah, no problem. I appreciate it very much. So yeah, if the Lord is willing, and the local rivers don't flood, then we can meet next week, same time and same place, and dig a little deeper.
Sounds good.
All right, thanks, man.
Yep.